My name is Ethan Carter, and I never imagined my life would take the turns it eventually did. If you had asked me a few years ago what I wanted out of life, I would have given you the simplest of answers: peace, stability, and a place to call my own. No grand ambitions to conquer the world, no desperate need for recognition, just a quiet life built on hard work and honesty. And for a while, I thought I had exactly that. I lived in Seattle, Washington, in a modest condo in Bellevue. It wasn't glamorous, not by any stretch, but it was mine. Every inch of that place carried the weight of my sacrifices. I had spent 10 years working as an attorney at a small, respectable law firm, stashing away every paycheck, cutting corners, refusing indulgences, just so I could afford that sanctuary. While others my age splurged on the latest cars or flashy gadgets, I drove the same old hatchback I'd bought straight out of law school. Its paint was chipped, the interior smelled faintly of coffee and late-night fast food, but it carried me faithfully through every season. That condo became more than a roof over my head, it was a symbol. A testament that perseverance, no matter how quiet, pays off. And every time I turned the key to step inside, I felt something rare: pride. But pride was never something I found easily in my family. My father, Michael Carter, was a stern man. At 65, his hands still bore the hardened calluses of decades spent repairing engines in a dimly lit auto shop. He wasn't a bad man, but he was demanding, sharp-tongued, and relentless in his expectations. Growing up under his shadow, I always felt like I was being measured against an invisible yardstick, one I never seemed tall enough to meet. Then there was my brother, Dylan. 5 years younger than me, Dylan was the golden child. He had charm that could fill a room, a smile that disarmed suspicion, and an air of confidence that fooled nearly everyone around him. My father adored him. My mother, Patricia, though more gentle, also gravitated toward Dylan's energy. Where my diligence was seen as boring, Dylan's recklessness was romanticized. Where my steady paycheck was considered safe, Dylan's endless promises of success were treated like glimpses of destiny. The truth was, Dylan had no job. Not a real one, anyway. He dressed in designer clothes, wore the latest smartwatch, and posted photos on social media that painted a picture of luxury: cocktail parties, beachfront getaways, high-rise apartments with glittering skylines. But if you scratched beneath the surface, it was all smoke and mirrors. He was jobless, drifting from one supposed venture to another, always talking about investors lining up or opportunities just around the corner. And yet, despite the hollowness of it all, my parents treated him like a visionary, and me? I was the dependable one. The one who never needed rescuing, never caused a scene. In their eyes, that made me less remarkable. It didn't matter that I paid my bills on time, that I built a life brick by brick, or that I stayed true to my word. Dependability, it seemed, wasn't glamorous. I tried not to let it sting, but it did. Deep down, I longed for just a nod of approval, a moment where my father would look at me with the same pride he reserved for Dylan. That moment never came. Things took a sharp turn when my parents' living situation began to deteriorate. They'd been renting a small, worn-down house on the outskirts of Seattle. Mold crept along the bathroom tiles, the roof leaked whenever it rained, and the rent was steadily draining their limited income. My father's retirement savings were sparse, my mother's health was declining with arthritis and aching joints. The burden was becoming too much for them. I couldn't watch them struggle like that. Despite the years of favoritism, despite my own bruised feelings, they were my parents. I owed them care. So I offered a solution: why don't you move in with me? I suggested one evening over dinner. My mother's eyes softened immediately, relief washing over her face. My father frowned, as if reluctant to admit they needed help, but he didn't refuse. Within weeks, they packed up their lives and moved into my condo. I cleared out the master bedroom for them, shifting myself into the smaller guest room. I bought a new couch, a large television for my father's sports shows, even made sure the kitchen was stocked with the foods they liked best. It felt like a new chapter, one where we could heal old wounds and grow closer as a family. At least, that's what I hoped. The reality was different. My expenses skyrocketed almost overnight. Groceries, utilities, medications, repairs, everything fell squarely on my shoulders. My father's pension barely covered his personal needs, and my mother's modest savings disappeared into medical bills. I told myself I didn't mind. This was family. This was duty. But as the weeks passed, something began to gnaw at me. The silence. I came home every evening, exhausted from long hours at the firm, carrying bags of groceries or takeout so they wouldn't have to cook. I expected, if not gratitude, then at least acknowledgement. Instead, I was met with nods, half-hearted comments, or complaints. The sink's dripping again. The Wi-Fi's too slow. These groceries don't taste the same as what your mother used to buy. My mother would murmur a quiet thank you here and there, but it was fleeting, swallowed by the noise of my father's grumblings. It felt less like I had invited them into my sanctuary and more like I had handed over my life. And then Dylan began to appear. At first, it was once a week. Then twice. Soon, he was practically living in my condo without ever asking. He'd waltz in with that effortless grin, toss his coat on the couch, and raid the fridge like he owned the place. He'd spin stories of his latest ventures, dazzling my parents with tales of investors, big deals, and luxury just on the horizon. Just need a little seed money to get things rolling, he'd say, flashing that smile. And my parents? They hung on his every word. I saw the gleam in my father's eyes, the way my mother leaned forward, soaking in every promise. To them, Dylan wasn't just their son, he was their ticket to glory. The first time I caught my mother slipping Dylan cash from the household budget, I confronted her. "Mom, what are you doing?" That money was for groceries. Her cheeks flushed, and she avoided my eyes. "It's just a small loan. Dylan will pay it back." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, but the sound caught in my throat. Pay it back? Dylan never paid anything back. When I pressed further, my father intervened. "Don't be petty, Ethan. Your brother has vision. Unlike you, stuck in some 9-to-5 grind. You should be proud he's aiming higher." I stood there, stunned. My sacrifices meant nothing. My steady career, my condo, the very roof over their heads, it was all invisible to them. Meanwhile, Dylan's fantasies were treated like gospel. The resentment began to build, slow and suffocating. I tried to ignore it, tried to bury it beneath a smile, but the cracks were widening. The breaking point came one evening at dinner. I had just shared a small victory at work, a case I'd won for a client that week. It wasn't earth-shattering, but it mattered to me. Before I could even finish, my father cut in. "Ethan, your brother has an idea. He just needs some capital. $120,000. That's nothing for you, with your steady job. Think of it as an investment in family." I nearly dropped my fork. "What? Dad, I don't have that kind of money to throw around. And even if I did, I wouldn't gamble it on one of Dylan's pipe dreams." The room went silent. My father's face hardened, his jaw tightening. "Don't be selfish. You've got that condo. You could remortgage it. Isn't family worth more than money?" My mother nodded softly, almost apologetically, her eyes pleading with me to agree. Dylan, of course, leaned back with a smug smile, as if victory was already his. The days that followed felt like walking through a storm that hadn't yet broken. The community was already buzzing with questions, with whispers that carried further than I expected. Some messages to my post were filled with outrage, others with disbelief, but all of them pointed toward the same truth, that what my parents had done was unforgivable. Yet, they acted as if nothing had happened. My father left me a message saying I was making a spectacle out of nothing. My mother sent a short text urging me to bring Clara home so the neighbors won't start gossiping. Each word was a knife twisting deeper. Grandma stayed with me, fragile but slowly regaining her warmth. She tried to help in the kitchen, folding laundry, moving quietly around the apartment as though afraid to be a burden even to me. But every time I saw her hesitation, I reminded her this was her home now. When I took her hand, she would smile faintly, though the sadness never fully left her eyes. One evening, she sat with me at the table, a half-finished scarf in her lap. Her voice was gentle but heavy with worry. "Ethan, people are talking. Soon there will be no hiding what happened. Are you ready for that?" I met her gaze, steady. "I'm not the one who should be afraid of the truth. They are." It wasn't long before the opportunity presented itself. The annual Riverbend Community Assembly loomed, a night of speeches, food, and neighbors congratulating one another on another year survived. I knew my parents would be there. They thrived on being seen, on maintaining their place in the town's social circle. And I also knew that was the place where the mask had to come off. The night of the assembly, the hall shimmered with chandeliers, polished wood floors reflecting golden light. People laughed and embraced, glasses clinked, conversations hummed with rehearsed politeness. I guided Clara inside carefully. She clutched my arm, her steps tentative, her eyes darting nervously around the crowded room. She whispered, "Are you sure this is right?" I squeezed her hand. "The truth belongs here, Grandma. No one can ignore it in front of everyone." When Martin and Elena swept into the hall, all elegance and charm, it was almost unbearable to watch. My father's suit was sharp, my mother's gown a cascade of shimmer, their smiles plastered on as though their consciences were spotless. They moved from group to group, shaking hands, offering compliments. If anyone had heard the rumors, they didn't show it, not yet. The speeches began, and with them came the questions. Toward the end of the evening, as the mayor opened the floor for concerns, a voice rose from the crowd. Linda, our neighbor, cleared her throat and asked loudly, "Martin, Elena, where has Clara been? We haven't seen her in weeks. Some of us are worried." The hall quieted. My parents exchanged glances before my mother stepped forward with a strained smile. "Oh, she's fine," she said smoothly. "She decided to spend some time with friends. You know how she is, independent." A few polite chuckles rippled through the audience, but they died quickly when I stepped forward, guiding Clara to the center of the hall. The crowd gasped, the sight of her frail form leaning against me cutting through the false brightness like a blade. "She isn't with friends," I said, my voice firm. "She was abandoned in Riverbend Park. By them." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. My father's face hardened, his jaw tightening. "That's a lie," he snapped. "Don't you dare accuse us in front of everyone." I pulled my phone from my pocket, pressing play on the recording. Their voices filled the hall, cold and dismissive. "She went for a walk. She's visiting a friend." Lie after lie, laid bare for all to hear. Murmurs spread like wildfire among the listeners. Then Linda spoke again, her face pale. "I saw your car by the park that night, Martin. I didn't think much of it then, but now," another neighbor, Rose, added, "I heard shouting. Clara was crying. I didn't want to interfere, but I regret it now." Clara's fingers tightened around my arm. She looked up at me, then at the crowd, and with trembling courage, she stepped forward. Her voice was quiet but clear. "They asked me for money. Again and again, they pressed me to give them my pension, my savings. When I refused, they said I was selfish. They said I was standing in the way of their happiness. and then, they left me in the dark, alone. Her words broke something in the room. Gasps, whispers, shaking heads, it was no longer gossip. It was truth, undeniable and raw. Elena's mask shattered first. She burst into tears, her voice rising shrilly. It wasn't like that. We just needed help. Everyone knows how expensive life is now, how hard it is to keep up. We thought, no, Clara interrupted, her tone stronger now, fueled by pain and dignity. You thought only of yourselves. Not of me. Not of the years I spent raising you, sacrificing for you. You looked at me not as your mother, but as a wallet. My father tried to speak, to wrestle control of the narrative, but the tide had already turned. The people who once admired him now stared with open disgust. A man near the front muttered loudly enough for all to hear, "Heartless." Others followed, voices overlapping, condemning, shattering the illusion my parents had built. Then Clara did something I hadn't expected. She straightened, letting go of my arm, her voice steady as she revealed what she had kept secret for years. When my husband passed, we owned a piece of land outside town. It was small then, worth little. But now, it is worth millions. I kept it hidden, planning to leave it for my family. For Martin. For his children. Because I thought loyalty and love would keep us together. Her eye swept the hall, then returned to my parents, burning with sorrow. But love cannot live where greed thrives. I will leave it all to Ethan, because he is the only one who still knows what family means. The room erupted in applause, in shouts of support. My parents stood frozen, pale and broken, their empire of lies crumbling in the space of minutes. My mother sank into a chair, sobbing. My father's fists clenched, his pride shattering, but even he knew there was no fighting the truth now. I took Clara's hand again, steadying her as the crowd closed around us, not to harm, but to comfort, to reassure. Neighbors who had once looked past her now embraced her, some weeping, some apologizing for not seeing sooner. The warmth that filled the hall was the very opposite of the cold bench in the park. Later that night, as I guided her back into my apartment, the moon casting silver light across her face, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. Ethan. I've lost a son tonight. I held her close. You haven't lost everything. You still have me. And I promise, you always will. She smiled faintly, the lines of pain softening into peace. Then maybe I haven't lost it all. When morning came, we stood together by the window, watching the horizon glow with the first colors of dawn. For the first time in weeks, there was no shadow in her eyes, only quiet strength. And as the light poured into the room, I understood that wealth was not measured in houses or land, not in pensions or bank accounts, but in love, in loyalty, in gratitude. My parents had chosen greed and lost everything. But I had chosen her, and in that choice, I had gained everything worth having.